again with our special guest, Emery Smith. In this episode, we're going to be getting into extraterrestrial and human hybridization and some of the very bizarre research that he was involved in on that subject. Emery, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
When you have told us about the work that you did with the autopsies of extraterrestrial bodies, it's a very curious subject for me because obviously these bodies are coming from somewhere.
Right.
But the scope of how many you yourself autopsied, you say, including all the tissue samples and everything, 3,000 roughly.
Yeah, specimens, tissue samples, and beings. Yeah.
The sheer genetic diversity of all that material, and then the idea of if light speed is a barrier for travel, how could there be so many extraterrestrials that we would even be able to get our hands on? Or is light speed not a barrier to your understanding?
Oh, light speed definitely is not a barrier for extraterrestrials. And that's a great point to correlate with the amount of numbers of tissue specimen autopsies I've done, and the number of operating rooms that are down there that are running, 24/7.
Right.
And the number of living habitable worlds just in our own solar system.
Right.
So the numbers are not a lot. We look at it like it's a lot of numbers, but as you pointed out, with everything else that's going on in the universe and all the different habitable worlds that's been proven, if you really think about it, it's not a big number for just one little planet to have all these different specimens. And what's not to say all these specimens came from outer space? Maybe they came from inside the Earth in different places. Maybe they did open up some cavities and found different, living things. Maybe some things have been coming through portals as well that we're unaware of that they've been collecting, which is a whole nother subject. But what's going on is basically we do know one thing. They have specimens, and they're taking this DNA and they're mixing it with human DNA, and they're trying to make the human a little bit more powerful, a little bit more stronger, and trying to also incorporate that to a super soldier program to have stronger bones, have a faster thought process, and these things.
Again, it was very surprising to me when we were talking about you seeing a reptilian type of being apparently in custody of two people. You said it was 10 feet tall, but that for you at that point in time, it could just as easily or maybe more easily have been something that we grew or we made. You weren't necessarily convinced you were seeing an extraterrestrial. What led to you having that level of confidence that such a thing could have even been accomplished?
Well, even, number one, just saying something like that, it's hard for me to believe, too much that I see when it's like that brought out in the open. And it's usually sometimes done intentionally and sometimes not. But after, working on the cell collection job, I also later on went into the super soldier program where they were mixing, hybrid DNA with human DNA in petri dishes, of course, really small level stuff, and also the osseointegration program of mixing tissue into titanium and allowing tissue to grow inside titanium and making our bones stronger.
How does that work? That seems to be pretty far out stuff. Titanium you wouldn't think is going to be able to blend with living per se.
That's what we all thought, but with the advent of new materials out there and the nanoparticles of the surface of the titanium, they have now mastered it and mimicked bone marrow. Bone marrow, when you cut into your steak and you have that mushy, spongy type, well, they have mimicked that exactly into titanium. Then they put stem cells and growth factors and tissue bone cells in there, and it grows and just flourishes inside titanium, and the body accepts it as a natural. It doesn't resist titanium. So steel and titanium is used in surgery all the time. So they learned this is going to be a great way to reinforce anyone's bones, number one, and to allow them to withstand a lot more pressure. They were having problems, of course, with the muscles and tendons. Muscles that can grow to infinite. The tendons were the problem because the tenocytes are the hardest thing to grow, and it couldn't support the weight of the extra metal and the bone and the strong muscle. So then they started looking into hybridization of DNA with stronger, tenocytes from other living creatures.
Well, you whizzed through a lot of stuff really fast there, so let's try to break this down into chunks. First of all, yes, I've heard about people having titanium rod in their leg, titanium bolts holding their bones together, that kind of thing. But are we talking about something that can be introduced into a healthy living adult, or are we talking about something that has to be sort of manufactured in conjunction with biological tissue as it grows, like a
Correct.
designer being?
That's correct. It used to be, let's just reinforce this, this person, see what happens, which is a very, it's surgical. It's a very brutal type thing. But now, with the advent of 3D printing organs and tissues, and all I need is a piece of your DNA, and I can 3D print you, over 9 months, and have you, your body and your everything. Even you will recoup a lot of your memory because it's stored in the DNA. So what I'm getting at is, what if I put the titanium already into the vat and 3D printed you over the titanium with all the articulate cartilage and made a program, and I could program, like you said, the kind of soldier I want.
So you're growing it life adult size from the beginning.
Correct.
Well, normally a human's going to take 13, 14 years to reach adult height, maybe even longer.
Right.
So what would be, how would they accelerate the gestation growth process?
Yeah, they do that 9 to 24 months. They can make a complete body. And they do that with the advancement of neurotransmitter chemicals and hormones and special amino acids from unearthed origin that allows the body to regenerate faster and the cells. The problem they're having is with the brain, it doesn't grow as fast as everything else. So that's the problem with when we take a pig heart, the reason we use pig valves in open heart surgery is because they grow at around the exact same time, cells. Now, if I took a dog heart and put it in you, it would grow so fast that, you would die because their cells replicate even faster. So what they're trying to do is, let's find all the species on the planet, and let's find out who replicates the fastest, and let's make it more of that species than human. And that way, that'll be the dominant gene for, in that being. But it'll have all those attributes of, great eyesight or whatever. So they were splicing, hundreds of different genes together, which is very difficult to do. They use very mega supercomputers to do this because of all the algorithms that are done. And they did it from scratch, and then they keep adding extraterrestrial DNA to it with the extraterrestrial DNA that they have found that is comparable to human DNA as far as the growth rates. And that's why I mentioned the pigs, believe it or not, are the closest thing to us that have the same growth rate. So once you get all the same growth rate on board, then you're allowed to add certain things to them and growing conditions to accelerate the hybridization and the growth, and at different times adding different, chemicals to that being so the brain keeps up with it, because the brain is the problem.
So you're saying that the bone marrow of an entire skeleton would be created almost like a chassis or framework and then grown, or is it?
Yeah, you can grow the bone over the titanium and just reinforce it. So the titanium's already there, and then you have these 3D printers that are printing the tissue onto the metal, or other substances. There's other substances they use besides. I'm just using titanium as a basis because everyone understands titanium and osseointegration in the science world. But there are other, substances that are using besides that now that are more flexible and that are more durable to keep these, to keep the person or the soldier or the programmed life form or the clone to, last longer in battle or to last longer on mission-oriented missions. So.
So if you print up a being into full adulthood in such a short time, you say as little as 9 months, does that also lower its overall lifespan because it hasn't grown at the slow rate that a human normally would?
I was not in the project long enough to know about that, but from what I heard, that is true because of the mutations that happen when you grow cells, not from when you grow cells. Like if I take your cell, like a stem cell, and I grow a bunch of them, some of them are going to be a little whacked off, and that could turn into a mutation. And then when they found out this happens, they embraced it because they were now making new species because they wanted it to mutate. And then it got really weird. So then you were having all these different species in one mutating and forming new crazy monsters. You know, all sorts of weird designs were being made, mixing extraterrestrial DNA with human DNA with the DNA from different types of bacteria in the ocean and this and that and the other, and it just got out of hand. And you'd see vats and vats of these these beings in stasis, that they failed. Like the one I told you about, the tiger. The person, the tiger,
part human, part tiger.
Looked like a hybrid, yeah. It was mutated, unfortunately.
Is it possible that if you have a being that didn't work out properly and is kept in stasis, can that genetic material be reused?
Yes.
Okay. I figured, but it's a little
question.
dark. But let's talk about that. So.
Well, you're talking about the actual genetic or the cellular material of that being in stasis. Yes, they can do two things. They can terminate the being and liquefy it, and then use that amino acids to do other things. They can also extract the DNA from that and save it, and come back to that later if they need a missing something, and basically adding and subtracting things from the DNA is what they're doing to find out what is going to be able to work together. Because the problem is everything wants to fight everything. Just like when we put someone else's heart in someone else's body, there's a rejection factor. There's just a rejection rate. So what they have perfected is getting rid of all that. Getting rid of the antigens and the antibodies that are saying no. They're now able to program the cells to accept it, even though the body might not last a year. But at least they will have a body to do whatever job.
So the lifespan, the fact that it's so compromised, what does that mean for trying to use clones to build a species? I would think that would be, it's almost like this is messing around with something that doesn't really have the potential to create any lasting life form. It's more like just a tinkering.
It is a tinkering, and tinkering gets my lab money. So when I make a breakthrough, I'm going to get, what I need for my lab for the next year, so I can do even more tinkering. But once you get to a spot, which they already have, so they're already making clones. That's not a secret. They're already making clones, and they're storing them in the thousands, okay? And they are able to keep these clones alive until they activate them. And we call these programmed life form clones, not just a regular clone that they make and they use for their own personal, whatever, assistant. These are clones that are actually going to use for something. And I can speculate only the worst, because I wouldn't want a whole world full of clones that who knows what's going to happen if they mutate or down the road, or how long their lifespan might be. So they're probably going to be used for war, because they're just an asset that can be destroyed. That's the only thing I can think of, because I don't know why they would store so many clones in one area, and then this information leak out into the private mill labs. It could be disinformation, but it's not. It's actual real information, and now it's
okay. There's going to be a part 2.